She came to their mansion as a nanny. But on Christmas Eve, the silent child she cared for finally spoke her first word. And it changed all their lives forever. On a quiet winter morning, when snowflakes fell silently down the tall windows of the fancy apartment, Sarah stood still, trying to understand what had just happened. Everything around her felt like a dream, as if time had stopped, as if the cold air froze in place because the little girl in her arms, a child who had never said a single word in her whole life, had just whispered something that broke down every wall Sarah had built around her heart. It was quiet, delicate, shaking, but clear. It was the word she had dreamed of hearing, was scared to hear, and hoped she would never hear because it could only hurt her in ways she wasn't ready to admit. Mommy. And in that one word, Sarah understood that leaving today, the last day of her one-year job, was going to hurt more than anything she had ever felt. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and special moments that change lives, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. It really helps us share more important stories with you. Sarah had come to the Peterson house exactly 1 year ago, needing a job badly, scared of failing, and unsure where she belonged in the world. After losing her own mother, her life had fallen into loneliness and quiet sadness, and she had poured herself into work just to keep going. When Mr. David Peterson, a man known more for his money than his kindness, offered her the job of live-in nanny for his daughter, she said yes right away. She had no idea back then how much that little girl would mean to her. Sophie, the millionaire's daughter, was 4 years old, with bright eyes and beautiful curls the color of golden honey and eyes that held galaxies of sweetness. Born deaf, she lived in a world without spoken sounds. But Sarah quickly learned that Sophie heard with her heart through touch, through feelings, through connection. At first, Sophie pushed her away. She hid behind doors, wouldn't look at her, and refused to use sign language. She had gotten used to silence, but she had also gotten used to building walls. Sarah understood that because she had walls too. Slowly, patiently, day by day, Sarah made her way into the child's world. She learned sign language, drew pictures with her, danced with her in the living room while snow fell outside, and held her whenever bad dreams made her tiny shoulders shake. Sophie learned to trust her in ways she trusted nobody else, not even her own father, who loved her deeply but had buried himself in work and guilt. After Sophie's mother died, the big house changed because of Sarah. Rooms that were once quiet and neat filled with warmth, crayons, little socks scattered everywhere, and the sweet smell of cinnamon pancakes. And with every passing week, Sarah felt her heart healing itself, though she never admitted it, not even to herself. But the contract was always there. 1 year only, no extensions, no attachments. The rules set by Mr. Peterson's lawyers were strict and clear. Sarah pretended it didn't bother her, pretended she was strong enough to walk away, pretended that she wouldn't break when the time came, until now on Christmas Eve, when Sophie changed everything with a single word. The morning rushed forward with a heavy ache. Sarah held Sophie tightly, burying her face into the child's soft hair while whispers of warmth pulled at her chest. She kissed Sophie's forehead, pretending the word hadn't cut deeply into her soul. Across the room, Mr. Peterson stood shocked, holding a letter in his shaking hands. The letter Sarah had written to say goodbye, since talking about it felt too painful. The Christmas tree glowed behind him, its ornaments showing colors across the glass walls. But nothing in the room shined as brightly as his surprise, because he too understood the meaning behind Sophie's first spoken word. It wasn't just a miracle. It was Sophie choosing someone who wasn't supposed to stay. Sarah gently pulled away from the child, though it felt like tearing herself apart. She walked to the window, trying to steady her breathing while snow fell like feathers outside. Her mind rushed through every memory. Sophie taking her first steps toward her. Sophie falling asleep on her chest. Sophie learning her first sign from her hands. She had been more than a nanny. She had been a guide, a protector, a safe place. And Sophie had been the one light Sarah didn't know she needed. Mr. Peterson walked toward her slowly, his voice soft, one of the rare times he wasn't commanding or distant. He told her he didn't want her to leave, that he could rewrite the contract, that Sophie needed her. But Sarah shook her head, not because she didn't want to stay, but because she was afraid to hope, afraid that she wasn't enough. Afraid she'd fail this little girl who had just given her the most precious gift. The afternoon passed by with heavy hearts. Sarah packed her suitcase while Sophie followed her everywhere, holding her sleeve, tugging gently, signing small questions Sarah couldn't answer without crying. The truth was simple. Sophie didn't understand being left behind. She didn't understand contracts. She only understood love. And Sarah, despite every rule, loved her. But as evening came closer, something changed inside Sarah. She watched Sophie sitting by the Christmas tree, holding the little wooden angel ornament they made together last week. Her small hands touching its wings as tears slipped down her cheeks silently. In that moment, Sarah knew she couldn't leave. Not like this. Not when this child finally spoke because of her. Not when Sophie had found her voice through love. Sarah knelt and gathered Sophie in her arms, holding her close as the ache inside her heart softened into something warm and steady. And that's when Mr. Peterson came back into the room, not as a businessman, not as a millionaire, but as a father. He told Sarah that Sophie had never reacted to anyone like this before, and that maybe some connections weren't meant to be broken. He asked her to stay, not because she had to, but because she was now family. The moment felt like a quiet miracle. Snow continued falling softly, the lights of the city twinkling like 1,000 tiny blessings. And for the first time in years, Sarah felt like she belonged somewhere. If this story touched your heart even a little, please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. It truly encourages us to create more meaningful stories for you. Before we end, special request. Comment below what was the most emotional moment for you in this story.